Everybody's dancing.
Greetings, my brothers and sisters, to the Sudds-R-Us podcast, hosted by Irene and Ben Sudderth Jr. Well, my wife Irene's not here today. We gave her the day off. She's the engineer and the producer. So actually, she's watching the grandkids. So she's probably working harder than we're working. But we have today joining with us my lovely and beautiful, educated and talented daughter, comedian Irene Sudderth. And she's also a distant learning coordinator, tag coordinator, and founder of Awaken Our Youth. Mm-hmm. So she's going to be our co-host and our guest today. And we're just thankful to God for this opportunity to come before you once again on the second season, podcast 11, and where we continue every week to bring you thought-provoking, creative content every single time we are broadcasting around the concepts of the circle of love, where we focus on God, marriage, family, and life. Now, we've been focusing on life the first quarter, so we've been discussing a few topics. We talked about the Black History Month, also HBCUs. We talked about women of distinction. So our theme on today, as we finish up this quarter, is educating during a pandemic. And this will be part 2 in that particular episode. Now, before we introduce our guests, we're just excited about who we have joining with us. Let me just give you a few housekeeping items first. First of all, I'd like to give a special thanks and a special shout out to our son, Ben Sudderth III, better known as Mr. Podcaster himself. He's the feature our podcast, along with many other topics around sports, music, relationship, social issues, comedy, spirituality. I mean, he covers it all. And we're all distributed under his archway, BS3 Radio. So you can follow BS3 Radio on all social media and podcast platforms. Now, if you're interested in joining BS3 Radio, you just thought about doing a podcast, or you have been trying to create one, you're having some difficulties, let me just encourage you to contact him. He also has a coaching opportunity available. You can reach him on his website at bs3coaching.square.site. That's bs3coaching.square.site. So we just want to thank you for joining us. All of our viewers and listeners, please follow us. Make comments. We want you to also subscribe and like, and please share it with those on your social media or podcast platforms. We can be found on Facebook at Sudds-R-Us. That's capital S, Suds, dash capital R dash us with a capital U. You can be found on Instagram, Sudds-R-Us, all lowercase, Suds _R _us. We can be found on Twitter, iSuds, ends with a Z instead of an S, iHeartRadio, Amazon Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Now, all your listeners, be very attentive. Now, in order to win, at the end of this show, we're going to give a little token of our appreciation for watching. What you have to do, you have to email Sudds-R-Us@gmail.com, Sudds-R-Us@gmail.com, the last question that we ask the panel. You have to email us the last question that we asked the panel. So thanks again for tuning in. Now, what we've done, my wife and I, we've been given an awesome task of homeschooling our grand twins. They are preschoolers. And we also help to monitor our grandson, Philip, who's in kindergarten when he was online taking his classes. And over this period of time, I tell you, we have more respect for teachers now than we've ever had before. And we just thank God for the ability, the opportunity, the patience, the tolerance, the temperament, and the temperance in order to help our daughter out when it comes to schooling our grandchildren during this pandemic. So we decided to get some advice from the experts. And that's what we have today. We have a panel of experts. because we never expected to be in this condition or this situation in this season of our lives. So we're excited about who's joining us today. We have two distinguished Black women. We have two phenomenal Black men, everyone who's educators and making positive impacts on the students and teachers within their respective arenas. And we have a phenomenal Black youth who's very creative and innovative. So we thank you again for joining us. What we want to do, we want to just give you an opportunity to, I know I did a brief introduction, but we want to look at this young man who's, we met at the House of Hope Atlanta, Greater Travelers Rest Baptist Church, and he sung on the praise team and with my wife and my daughter. And we're just excited about him being on. He's the lead instruction specialist in Augusta, Georgia, where Morehouse originated. Our son, he has adopted us as his godparent. Eric Bland is with us today. We have our cousin. He is what we consider the long lost cousin because my daughter met him when she was at Spelman and he was at Morehouse, and she called home and she said, "Mama, this fine young man is walking around campus and he looks like Uncle Clinton." That's my wife's brother. And he said, "Well, if he looks like Uncle Clinton, that's probably your cousin." So she asked him, and he's from Ohio and turned out to be our long lost cousin. He's the author of Rebel, co-founder of Educate the World, co-founder of Engines That Work, and director of special projects. Our cousin Carlton Collins is joining us today. And then we have my grandson's principal, Phillips principal, Principal Nikki Greer, founder of school leader of Delta STEAM Academy, which means deliberate, excellent leads to achievement. So we thank Principal Greer for joining us today. And then we have Micaiah Samuels Page, a seventh grade student and founder of Micaiah the Great Foundation, Inc. of Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you for joining us, our young scholar, Micaiah. Now, we're going to ask you a few questions. I'm pretty sure you received the questions, but we don't want you guys to feel, constraint to those questions. Don't feel confined when you're answering the questions. If you want to elaborate, if you need to give some additional information, please don't hesitate to do so. Regardless of the topic, if you want to join in and chime in on another panel's question, please just let me know. So let's get right into it. Our opening question is for everyone. We're going to start with my brother Eric, my son Eric. We want to ask you just a brief introduction of yourself to school. Were you professional? Educational background, and what or who inspired you to become an educator?
Awesome. Nice to meet everybody. Like stated, my name is Eric Bland. I am the lead instructional specialist of the Richmond County School System in Augusta, Georgia, about 2 hours outside of Atlanta. I received my bachelor's and master's from the University of Georgia, and I never thought I would be an educator. In fact, I often said I never would be an educator growing up. And so after undergrad, I moved back home to Augusta. A former teacher was now a principal. So I was alternatively certified. And then that was in early 2000s. And here I am almost 18 years later. And I'm so proud of being able to say that I've served so many students.
All right. Thank you. All right, we're going to keep going on. Principal Nikki Greer, same question. Introduce yourself, your school, profession, your educational background, and what or who inspired you to become an educator.
Okay. My name is Nikki Greer. I am the proud founder and school leader at Delta STEAM Academy. We just opened our doors this past fall, so just really excited to still be in this game. Opening a school during a pandemic was no small feat. So really excited about that. I received my undergraduate degrees from Vanderbilt University, both in engineering and mathematics. And so I was also not a teacher originally and swore to never be one. My mother's an educator, so is my sister. And I said, somebody in the family has to make some money. So, I'm not going to go that route. And then I practiced biomedical engineering for 5 years after getting my master's at UT Knoxville. And then I just felt the call to come and teach children. I've kind of done education on the side. So I joined Teach for America in 2006. And then similar to Mr. Bland, it's been history ever since. I've served as a high school math teacher, a middle school principal, a high school principal, high school assistant principal. And I've also been a principal coach of K-8 principals across the country. Great to be here.
Wow. Great. What a resume. All right, let's go to our cousin Carlton. Same question. Introduce yourself, your school, profession, your educational background, and what or who inspired you to become an educator.
Okay. So Carlton Collins again. My background, I did school at Morehouse. So my BA was in history, and then I had a concentration in child development. And also while I was at Morehouse, I started an organization, which was Morehouse Education Association, which was geared to get more Black males into teaching, whether that's tutoring, mentoring, internships, or teaching outright. And I had the opportunity to send a good number of, Black educators, whether from Morehouse, Spelman, or Clark, to a number of different teaching networks around the country and even some around the world. So it just gave me a great, kind of foundation there. And, I started teaching a little more when I got to Cincinnati, worked in charter school, also worked as a college advisor, career specialist with the largest mentoring network here. And, currently we have the fortunate opportunity to launch My Brother's Keeper in Lincoln Heights. Lincoln Heights, small community, Black-run municipality. It's the eldest Black-run municipality north of the Mason-Dixon. It's the area that I happened to be reared in. But we're the first My Brother's Keeper chapter in the Cincinnati area. So we got that working, and it's just grateful to be working with the Obama Foundation. And I got into education. Shout out to Amanda Setters. She handed me this white lady from Rhode Island, right? So it comes from a random source. But she handed me Dr. Jawanza Kunjufu's book, Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys, my senior year while I was at Princeton High School. And from there, it was on. I knew I was going into education.
All right. Thank you. So now we're going to let my daughter introduce herself. She's going to answer the same questions, and then she will interview Makai.
So hi, I am Camelia Sudderth. This is my 9th year in education. I graduated from Spelman College. Then I went to Baltimore and started teaching with the program called Urban Teachers. It used to be called Urban Teacher Center. Now it's called Urban Teachers. And through them, I was able to get my master's degree in elementary education and special education. After teaching in Baltimore for 3 years, I moved back to Atlanta and have taught in a variety of schools. But now I am currently a tag teacher, which is also known as a gifted teacher, and a testing coordinator. So I test scholars that are eligible for gifted services. I got into education kind of through just watching my grandmother and learning more about my grandmother, who is probably one of my closest ancestors, I think, because she created her own school in Hickory, North Carolina, which is the rural South, at a time when Black people were not really inspired to go to school or encouraged to go to school or had a space for them. So my grandma was like, we're going to make our own school, period. I'm going to drive y'all to school, and that's going to be that. So she encouraged me to really do education for Black people, and that has been my goal. So I will start with Makai. So Makai was my student in 5th grade, Atlanta Public Schools, and I saw so much in him at such a young age. Now he's in 7th grade, but I saw just so much in him, so much creativity, so much energy, so much personality. And a funny story, and this I will take credit for. So during Christmas, we had an elephant exchange. Yes, we're telling this story. And
yes.
That's when different kids bring different gifts. Most adults know how to play that game. So he ended up getting a yo-yo that was probably like a Family Dollar yo-yo. And I was bent, like so mad. I do not want this because we had students bringing like real expensive gifts, and he was getting the last gift. I don't know why he got the last.
Like my name was like Samuel's Page, so I wanted to go buy.
Somebody had something that they took it from Makai. That's how the gift exchange works. So he was left with the yo-yo. He was so bent, but because he's an inventor, was manipulating the yo-yo, turning it to something else, like had lights with it. He learned how to play with it. And then like most of 5th grade wanted to have a yo-yo after that. He was playing with the yo-yo in the hall. All the kids were like, oh, there's Makai, the guy with the yo-yo. And like everyone wanted a yo-yo in our school after that. And then I think I saw a video on Instagram of him like really playing with the yo-yo, like skating. Like Makai, like the yo-yo is like Makai's life now. So I will take credit for Makai being inspired by the yo-yo.
I really want. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. But nevertheless, Makai is a great student, and I want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then I'll ask you some questions.
All right. So hi, my name is Makai Samuels Page. I am the creator of the Makai the Great Foundation. Also, I am an inventor right now, but I, want to become a mechanical engineer when I grow older, and I also want to be an inventor. So.
Nice. All right. So now that you've been in virtual school for a year, I think your school may be going back to in person. How was it initially being at home and being away from your friends and classmates?
Well, basically it was really fun. I liked it, but sometimes it could be a little hard because, I miss my friends, it's been a while since I've seen like other humans, stuff like that. And I miss like my teachers as well. I also, it's just the way I learn, and Miss Hardaway, you already know the way I am. I'm like hands-on. That's the way I learn. I don't, I don't really learn good like online and stuff like that. But I'm hands-on, and that's the way I roll. So, basically, it's really hard. It's with like the screen and stuff, the computer and all, and then it's just a little bit different. It just feel like. I've just been looking at a screen all day. It's a little bit more stressful. But at the end of the day, it does have a few perks. Like as soon as I get off the computer, it's just like off, sleep. I can wear like the kind of clothes I want, and like really like my go-to outfit is maybe like some sweatpants and a black shirt, and then I'm good. Like that's the way I go.
Good. So overall, even though there are some downfalls and the perks are very there because you get to take a nap and wear your variety of leisure clothes, would you prefer to go back in person though, even with those different perks?
Yes, I would prefer to go to school. However, I understand because of the coronavirus that learning online is for our safety. And now I've gotten accustomed to it. So, we just kind of roll with it.
Good. So Makai has also been featured on at APS in terms of winning state and national awards for his inventions. So how are you able to balance online school, virtual school, regular school, and all of the things that you're doing outside of school?
Well, first off, like what we do, I'll just go and tell you guys like what this little schedule part is. Like I wake up, for a morning meeting, we chill. We do this little thing where from like 8:15 to like 8:45, which is like morning meeting, and we say one of the morning inspiration quotes. So the quote goes like this: "In my life, I aim to strive and thrive, not only to have it with some passion, but with compassion, some passion, some humor, and some style." So it's a nice quote. I love it, and I usually like one of the only people be like one in the chat so I could like. And do that because I love that quote and I want to go by it. And then after that, from 9 to 11, our lunches after that. I think it's 11 to 12:30, and then going back to class from 12:30 to 2:30 p.m. So usually, I sometimes have to miss out on some maybe lunch or something. Lunch is probably the most time I've spent without stuff like that. Like maybe. On lunchtime, we'll probably go out and do a little sub meeting to log in my place inside the fair, And then definitely after school, I also do STEAM lab. So that's another thing. It's only on Wednesdays though, so that's that kind of sucks because I love STEAM so much.
Yeah.
But we just pretty much do that, and then after that, I probably go out. I'll work on the jet ski, like usually after like class, maybe at like 9, like when I'm about to go to bed. I go to work on that, test out, do some running, like I just diagnostic, like just making sure that everything's running and working, and then after that, just just hit the hay, like go to sleep.
So it sounds like you have a full schedule. You have school, then you kind of have work at the end of school, making sure that your jet ski or whatever your current invention is, that you're getting it up to speed. So congratulations on the nonprofit. That is really cool to be so young with a nonprofit. So tell us a little bit about the vision. Like, what do you want to accomplish with your nonprofit?
Okay, but first off, I just want to say thanks off to my beautiful mother for providing me with the stuff I need to make this business. But I'll go ahead and tell you guys what it is. So the Makai the Great Foundation, Inc., with our sponsors and partners, we will give resources to young inventors like me. We are cultivating future generations, and we are giving young inventors to have a better world, and what we want them to have the resources to create and innovate. And be great, which is our slogan. So create, innovate, and be great. And with our anti-bullying initiative, we bring awareness and solutions to the bullying crisis. But we will be launching soon. I am aiming to launch it on my birthday, which would be the best birthday present ever. And which is a month from now, so birthday soon. Like it's coming up. Yeah.
Sounds good. So tell us where they can follow you and where they can keep up with what you're doing.
So please follow me on Makai the Great with 2 T's on Instagram. And yeah. And oh yes, you can also soon you can check out my website, which will be the Makai the Great Foundation website. And it'll be .org, so the Makai the Great Foundation.org. So please check that out soon. It's coming up. And yeah.
Great. Thank you for joining us, Makai.
Thank you, Makai. Awesome. Now, I know that our panelists are like, why did you have me follow after that young man? But before we go back to Brother Eric, I just want to thank those who are tuning in. My wife, even though she's watching the grandkids, she's tuning in. Kanitra Mason, thanks for tuning in. We also have Danielle Frederick. Thank you for tuning in. Andrina Johnson. Thank you for tuning in as well. Chanel Maya Samuels. That's Makaya's mom, checking up on him. Lynn Walker. Thanks for tuning in. There she is. Danielle.
It's actually my grandmother.
Grandmother. Okay, good. Deidre, my daughter, Camille's sister, is also checking in. So thank you so much for all that are tuning in. Let's go back to Brother Eric, or son Eric, I like to call him. Now, as a lead instructor specialist, give us your take on why do you think academic test scores are so low, are so subpar among young Black students?
Wow. Thank you, Pops. That's what I call him. That's a loaded question, and you're right. I'm wondering, why do I have to follow Makai? Awesome job, Makai. You are our why. So I'm sure Principal Nikki and Carlton and Camelia, we're just like, this is why we go to work every day. But
thank you so much. That means a lot.
No problem. To answer the question, I truly feel the test scores are the way they are because we have a huge equity gap. Okay. Meaning education doesn't look the same from school to school, district to district, state to state. And so you can have a kid on one side of town receiving a certain level of education, and on the other side of the tracks, completely different. Wow. The quote that comes to mind is from President Barack Obama. He stated, "We are true to our creed when a little girl born into the bleakest poverty knows that she has the same chance to succeed as anybody else." Yeah. What pains me most is even in Richmond County School System, which is my home, we service about 53 schools. My goal every day is to try to make sure no matter what school a child enters, they're entitled to a quality education, where we have free quality preschool, high challenging standards, and engaging teaching and learning in a safe and supportive and well-resourced school. I don't ever feel that my goal as an educator is accomplished until those three things happen. It's unfortunate that we look to this test data, but I love it. As a former mathematics teacher, I use data to drive my instruction. Well, I use data to drive my instruction as a teacher, as an assistant principal, when I worked for an alternative preparation program certifying teachers, and now as the lead instructional specialist, I still use data. And so, unfortunately, during this pandemic, it feels kind of cruel to test kids, knowing that some schools have been virtual, some schools have been face-to-face, some have been a hybrid. And in my heart, I know there's some baby somewhere who hasn't done school in a year.
Yeah.
That's the harsh reality.
Right.
And so to test that kid is unfortunate. But when that kid enters in August, educators, we need that data to know where we start, because for the first time, everybody in education is now a student.
Right.
No one has ever done education in a pandemic. And so we'll need that data to drive the test scores. I love it, because until we can get an equitable education in every single school, my passion is public education, because I want the most kids, to be quite frank. And if the most kids are in public school, that's where I want my impact to be. And I know it's an uphill challenge. I love the work that I'm hearing of Principal Greer and Carlton Collins, because we need those outside resources. Kind of reminds me of the foundation of HBCUs. We need the HBCUs, we need the PWIs, to make sure that make sure that every kid everywhere receives a quality education.
Wow. I agree. And if anyone would like to chime in, please don't hesitate to do so. But we also, I'm pretty sure, agree that, educating the child is a consistent partnership between the parent, guardian, like a old African proverb says, it takes a village to raise the child. They need a partnership with the school itself. Now, if you want to chime in to Eric's question or part two to that question, I mean, sounds like he mentioned that he thinks that the test may be a little discriminatory or maybe a little biased towards Blacks. Who would like to answer that?
Well, I mean, just jumping in.
Go ahead.
I think when we're talking about, taking of a test, right? We're talking about it's built for a certain type of learner to then take that knowledge and then put it down on the test in that way, right?
Okay.
And I think, even, when I thought about the question to begin with, and you're talking about why are test scores down, I think they're down, kind of uniformly across the board, right, in terms of Black and brown kids. But when we're talking about during the pandemic, it got worse. And it got worse because kids had one way to, gather knowledge or gain knowledge. And then it's now they're supposed to spit it back, and, everything being multimodal. And that's, kind of engaging kinesthetic learners, auditory learners, visual learners. That's really, really important. Right. And, Makai said it, I spend all of these hours sitting in front of a computer, and I don't get a chance to move. I don't get a chance to get up. I don't get a chance to engage in a real way. And that really, is definitely to the detriment when you're talking about, acquiring that knowledge. And, the biases definitely just come out in terms of education. We see them in the curriculum all the time. And I think that's why it's always important as well to, just as a parent, right, it's your responsibility to make sure your kids have, or you're teaching your kids their own, kind of cultural curriculum, right? Particularly if you're Black and brown, because your history is not going to be represented in that book. And it's not part of what, needs to happen. And without that, and this kind of goes back to the thought processes of Dr. Kunjufu, of, kids who don't see themselves, and don't, take in that sense of pride around, being Black and educated or having knowledge or whatever the case is, that's always going to impact their scores and what they're capable of doing. And I would say, final thing, just, when it comes to schools now, I feel like when we were growing up, it was more so, nobody taught to the test, right? They taught that you learned as much as humanly possible, and the tests will just fall somewhere in there and you'll get all the things that you need to know from the test. But I'm going to teach you above and beyond that. And right now, it seems like people are just teaching at that ceiling, and nobody's really addressing the sky.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Excellent. I agree. Okay, Principal Greer, if you want to chime in on that question, you can. But your question also is, how do you feel about your role as a principal running a school during a pandemic?
Yeah, so I think it's tied to all of that. To what Carlton was saying about the test being biased, a lot of that is a lack of exposure for our kids, right? So one of the things we're doing at Delta STEAM Academy is providing that exposure. So part of the reason I chose to do a STEAM school as opposed to a liberal arts school or a traditional school is because only 9% of all the STEM jobs in the country are held by African American people, right? Okay. So that means there is a lack of exposure, there's a lack of interest, there's a lack of education in that area. And so we're starting kids like Philip as young as 5, beginning to get this love for science and math. But on top of that, we're building these partnerships with the community to where we can then expose our kids to more things like gardening, like golf, like skiing, things that they talk about on these assessments that the average Black child is not experiencing. So there is a lack of exposure. There's also the bias that's there. And then there is, to Mr. Bland's point, the cruelty of even testing kids right now, right? During a pandemic, knowing that we can't, that it hasn't been equitable access for every child. And so that's really been tough. At Delta STEAM Academy this year, we've been in a hybrid space. 30% of our kids have been virtual all year, and the other 70% are in person. And so our in-person students are definitely having a very different experience than our virtual kids. We don't believe in putting kids on the computer for 6 hours a day because that much screen time isn't good. So our virtual babies are getting, 2.5 hours a day. They're getting the foundation, math, and they're getting their reading, but they aren't getting the other creative pieces. They're not getting the dance, the theater, and things like that. So it's that kind of stuff that is putting us in a place where we continue to see these inequities in our testing in particular. So as a principal, what I've tried to do is create my own little microcosm of what I feel like is the perfect blend of all these things. So we actually teach social studies through an African-American lens. 99% of our kids are African-American. We had our curriculum written in-house. And so every conversation that we talk about, like, yes, we're talking about George Washington being the first president because kids need to know that. But we also need to know that George had a conversation with Phyllis Wheatley, and she is the reason that his wife ultimately freed some of their slaves. And so the kids need to know both sides of that. We one of our core values is culture. And so we talk through our creed and through our core values about how we embrace and celebrate our culture, making sure that kids see themselves, know what's possible. And to Mr. Collins' point, we got to teach to the ceiling. So I just told my teachers, Milestones is coming up for us. Milestones is our assessment for Georgia. Is coming up in May for our 3rd graders. And we're not going to stop and do any sort of like boot camp or, pep rallies or none of that stuff that you traditionally see. Right. We're actually going to continue to teach. And by the time they take the test, they're already going to be entering 4th grade material, right? Yeah. So we're not going to be, yes, we're going to pause for a moment to say, this is how the test is set up. This is how you use the computer. We want to make sure they're good with typing, but we've also had them doing keyboarding without tears all year, to make sure that they have been getting set up for that. So it also doing it this way takes away some of the pressure. So the kids don't feel like this is something new or different than what they've already been doing all year. And so now for them, it's more like, this is your time to shine, as opposed to there's this very high pressure, high stakes test that's coming for you. And it's going to determine if you move on or not. It's all these wild things that we put in kids' heads leading up to assessment. So we've tried to really reframe what testing is, what an assessment is. It's really just like, show me what you know. Show me what you know so that I can then, meet you there and move you forward.
Wow. Well, thank you. I'm sure it's been a challenge. We know, to say the least, that these are some difficult times and some also challenging times. But I thank you for bringing out some of the advantages also within this COVID-19 learning situation. So let's go to our daughter, Camelia, for our third question. Now, as a teacher and a counselor, supervisor, how do you feel about teaching during the COVID-19 pandemic?
I think it's cool. It is what it is. I think that there are some aspects that are challenging, especially with students logging on, having access to parental support or guardian just to support the technology piece, having all the materials, all the things, supporting teachers and making sure that we have our things ready to go. Because as a teacher, you can't go find something and stop the class and have them do busy work. You actually have to have everything set up in advance, all tabs ready, everything logged in. And so I've had to learn how to get super organized and utilize the tech tools that are available. So I'm really big on a website called Nearpod because it kind of links everything into one opportunity. It has like interactives that scholars can do. It lets you embed videos. It lets you embed collaborative boards. So I love that. I also have used Padlet a lot. It's similar to collaborative boards, but allows scholars to put up their responses. Flipgrid is another one that allows scholars to record. So I think the biggest thing is learning how to keep them engaged, learning how to, like Carlton said, meet their particular need. So, and then also understanding that we're in a pandemic. So there are some schools that are very strict about have your camera on, you got to sit up, you have to do all these things. And I respect that so that we have an eye on the child, but also just being mindful that not all scholars are going to want to be on camera. There are scholars that are shy in person. So they're definitely going to be shy when they're in their home. So just being mindful that this is still a child and they're learning how to navigate this just as much as we are. But overall, I think it has been a tremendous learning experience. As Eric said, we are students just like they are students, and we're navigating all of this and trying to give each other grace so that we can get through it and get back into the classroom.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I know it's been different, definitely that. But also, I can pose this question to the panel as well. Has it been a bit more relaxing because of the flexibility when you're in your own environment, especially if you're teaching or you educating from home? Is it a little bit more relaxed than actually going to the schoolroom every day or being in class every day or having an option of maybe a couple weeks going in or out?
I think you were saying my schedule. So yes, it is relaxed. I was talking to one of my friends. Me going back to school every day at like 6:30 just seems like so foreign. So it's definitely going to be an adjustment next year waking up. I'm not going to hold you, but so yeah, I've been very appreciative of the relaxed environment.
Okay. Anyone else want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I'll say we just came back from 100% virtual. We went 100% virtual for cold and flu season, and our babies are like 12 noon, they're done. We are ready to take a nap, right, along with their teachers, because the teachers were out for 10 weeks as well. And so all of us coming back into the building, having to be there at 7:00, stay there for 6.5, 7 hours. Mm. It's a lot. Like you don't realize when you're at home like that, how much your brain relaxes into a whole different mindset. And then when you're coming back to a very rigid schedule, yeah, it's tough. This first week back, yeah, it was rough.
All right. I can understand. Well, as a grandparent homeschooling, it's been really a blessing to not have our, grandkids come home sniffling, nose running with colds, and because they've caught something at school. So this has been a whole year where we haven't had any problems with sniffling or nose running or colds or anything like that. So with that particular direction, let's go our fourth question to Cousin Carlton. Now, as a husband, father, and entrepreneur, how is it with raising? You have three, I understand, and you have a pretty big gap between the oldest and the youngest. Absolutely. So how is this in this day and time different from when you were raised?
That's a loaded question. Um, I would say really it's the community that's around us, right?
Okay.
I think when we're talking about the village that existed, and those people who they didn't have to be your parent, they didn't have to be related to you, they didn't just them being older than you and knowing of your parents or your grandparents or whoever else, they had the opportunity, or they took up the space to say, I'm responsible for your direction. Right. I think we've gotten away from that in a lot of different ways. And so I think that's one area. But then also, we were forced to perform, right? And whether that's the church play, the choir, the Black History play, there was something going on, right? There was some stage, some platform that you had to get on.
Yeah.
And I grew up singing. So I started singing when I was 4. So it was like, and there was a couple times we sleep on the pew, and my grandma said, "Hey, my grandson's about to come up here and sing such and such song." Like, what? You could have. We rode to church with you, Grandma. You could have told us, gave us a heads up, something. But it was always about, the opportunity or the platform to then, present and then be encouraged by the folks that were around you, right? Even the one, and we all remember in church, there was that one soloist who really couldn't, hit that note, but they still got all the encouragement and love in the world when they came off that stage, right? And that was a different level of confidence that it instilled in us. And I think that's a huge, huge difference. That some of those institutions that we have, that we had in yesteryear, aren't as strong or as haven't been as durable over the decades. And then this is something that I always talk to kids about, and I do some trainings around, and it's the concept of two things have changed, and they've changed forever, and that's friend and follower, right? And that's because of social media. So like we knew the difference between a friend and an acquaintance, or somebody who just in our class, right? Like you didn't get that moniker as a friend, so it didn't affect us negatively in the same way. And then to be a follower was a negative thing, and social media has completely changed that as well. And so socially, I think there's some huge distinctions in terms of the differences, how we operate from an interpersonal perspective, and how much social weight certain things carried, right? There could be a situation where there's a bullying or capping or whatever. It's one day, we're going to come back the next day, and it'll be forgotten, or, come back next week and it'll be forgotten, and you can move on from it, right? And a lot of this generation doesn't understand that social media is still written in ink. And it's here in a different way, and it's harder for them to move forward from it. So I think a lot of the interpersonal things are very much so different. But I would also say, I think we know more and want to do better than in previous generations, right? And we have access to more knowledge. And, those of us that are educators who are on the ground, and even those just caring, loving adults, right?
Right.
It go above and beyond and infuse things in the kids in ways that, our parents and grandparents just didn't know. Right. Some of the old wisdom was still great for us, and it was good for us to have. But there's so many other things that we're aware of now that kids get, and it develops them in another way too.
All right. Thank you. Oh, that's really interesting. I definitely agree to that. Okay, Brother Eric, back to you. 5th question that we have today. What's one of the positive things about COVID-19 that has afforded you an opportunity to launch, grow, and build on the dreams that you have set aside for so long?
The positive things about the pandemic and educating in the pandemic is everyone must be a student. That's my point. Kind of what Camelia said, teachers have to teach differently. Students will learn differently. Principals have to run their schools differently.
Right.
Superintendents have to run school systems differently. In fact, the position I have was created, I guess, in my school system before the pandemic, but it was needed to make sure that every teacher is supported. So my primary duty is to make sure that teachers are supported. That looks totally different this year than it's ever been. To dig deeper into, because I know you, Pops, and Mama Irene, especially for Black kids. So education wasn't founded for us.
Right.
But now we get a chance to innovate an education that is for us. So I get up every day, as challenging as my job is. It's very challenging. But I get to create the school system in which my 1-year-old great nephew will come into. My 10-year-old nephew, I get a chance to now be at the table to decide what's in that curriculum. How is it taught? I think that's a positive, even though it's rocky, especially in our school system, because it's been hybrid all year. So that's been an open door, closed door. School open, school closed. As soon as we get one system in place, it changes. But I get so excited at this constant change, because what I do know for certain is in August, we'll be much better at educating in the pandemic than we were last August. So education is changing. And so anything that's changing for me, that's always good. So I call them pivots. In our school system, that's what we call them. This year has been about pivoting. As soon as you're in one thing, you have to pivot to another, and you have to operate with compassion over compliance. When I was in education as a teacher, everything was about compliance. Did you do the lesson plan? Did you do this? Did you do this? And it kind of took the person away from the job. And to be a true educator, you have to be a servant leader. So you have to put people before things. And so for the first time in education, I'm so excited, because what we're talking about is compassion over compliance. These are people, and we will treat it accordingly. So the positive for me is everything I didn't like as a student, everything I didn't like as a teacher, everything I didn't like last year, I now get a chance to innovate and create and collaborate and be a part of the change in which our students will see.
God done turn that thing around.
All right. All right. Amen, Brother Eric. Amen. Would someone else like to chime in on that question? A positive thing about COVID-19?
Well, I like to give a testimony.
Okay.
So,
all right.
I've been trying to get out of the classroom for years, y'all. And I think the pandemic opened up a position that I'm able to have, because I'm next year going to be the coordinator of digital learning. And that would not have been possible unless a pandemic came. So just to add a testimony on that testimony, the pandemic was necessary, okay, just to shift some things in education and allow for growth, like you said, allow for more compassion, not looking at people as just numbers, not looking at students as just numbers, but looking at them as human beings who have a lot going on. So yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
All right. Great answers. Oh, man. Okay, let's keep going. We're rolling right along. You guys are excellent. Let's go to the principal, please. On our 6th question, what Black person in education would you like to lift up or point out that was a great influencer in your life?
So it's hard to name just one, right? So we'll start with my mom, because my mother is a retired educator. She was a principal in Clayton County, assistant principal. She did her whole career pretty much in Clayton. She was one of the first Black teachers to integrate Clayton County schools. And so growing up, my mother always made sure that what I'm trying to do at Delta STEAM by infusing this African-American lens was happening at my house. So when we went to Point South Elementary in Clayton County when I was only in 1st grade, I was the only Black kid in my class. Now we know that Clayton County has completely flipped, and so it's really interesting to see how just in the last 20 to 25 years, so much has changed about the way we're educating kids. And so my mom has been sort of that constant, person that pushes me to learn the next thing or pushes me to find the next new thing. A lot of my inspiration to become a principal soon as I got in the classroom, I knew that I didn't want to be a teacher forever. I knew I needed to get to the top because that's where you make, systemic change. And so it's really important that we have solid teachers, don't misunderstand, but it also, we need people at the top to incorporate systemic change. And so DSA was born out of this whole idea of like, I need to couple what my mom did for me. I need to couple the opportunities that I had growing up with what I know that Black children need. And so my mother did that for me. And so I want to be able to do that for other people's children. I don't have children of my own. And so I see my responsibility in the school as being that extended parent that helps to make sure that kids have the moral values that they need, because we're not teaching morals in schools anymore. Making sure they have a moral compass, making sure they also understand their identity, who they are, and they feel affirmed in that. But also that they understand that education is the one thing that people can't take from you. And so it's your job to get as much of it as you can so that, you are armed with what you need to attack any situation, any circumstance that you might find yourself in. So she's like probably my greatest role model when it comes to education and inspiring me. And then right after that, right up under her would be Marva Collins. I became a principal in Chicago, and the experience that I had there and seeing how kids live and how different that was from how I live in the South, and how the Midwest is so different just from either Southern living. And the conversations I would have with children about how, it's like not normal for you to have to look over your shoulder every time you're coming to school. Like that's trauma. That's not actually what should be happening in your life. And I thought about all those years ago when she kind of saw the same thing, kids being labeled, you having to have a different approach to education. And therefore the answer is to start your own. And so DSA is coming from a place of like, I can't find the answers in these other places that I've been seeking it. And I feel like God has the whole time been saying, no, this isn't it bigger. This isn't it bigger. And so DSA is the product of that bigger, that I'm going to be able to do it myself for other people's children, K through 12, so that's where a lot of my inspiration comes from, the two of them, keeping them at the forefront of my mind all the time.
Oh, thank you so much. That is beautiful. That is beautiful. Well, we've getting some comments here. We have Mr. Podcaster himself, our son, Ben Sudderth III, awesome. Danielle Frederick says, preach. I'm not sure if she's talking about Brother Eric or Principal Greer, but y'all both are right on point. And Drina Johnson said there is goal in the crisis, new positions because of the pandemic. Priscilla Anderson said, yes. Alexander, said, yes. And Danielle said, yes, Cam. All right. Yes. So we got some yeses and some amens. So we're right on track. Let's keep going. We're ending almost to our final question here, but we want to get to Cousin Carlton. What are your goals to make an impact on education now? We've been talking about where we are, and the reason we got here is because of the pandemic. But what are you looking at far as in the future, even when we return to school, or what it's going to be like in the fall of 2021?
So for us, right? So I'm also part of an organization called the Heights Movement. This is a number of us. We consider ourselves to be the fortunate few who had the opportunity to get out of Lincoln Heights, go off to college and to our respective colleges, and then come back. We all within 3 years of graduating from each other, but we've known each other for, the latest person that I met was probably 10 years old. So we've known each other for years, and now it's just an opportunity. We started the Heights Movement. It's a new 501c3, and through that organization, we really had an opportunity to do quite a bit in a very, very short period of time. It started through our advocacy to remove Cincinnati Police Department gun range. So they've had an open air shooting range there for the last 74 years. Like, we as kids grew up hearing gunshots, like every single gunshot. So when you talk about that trauma, Principal Greer, like, that was the big thing for me, right? Because I came back to the community. I was the program director, so I was running the summer camp and after school program. And, the teachers that I was supervising, those who were from outside of the community, I didn't really have answers for them. in terms of what some of the kids were dealing with, right? And why they see some behavior, and why is this preponderance of kids with special education and that kind of piece. So that's kind of where it started, and us really just trying to get rid of this gun range, and then also have some kind of conversation about what does healing look like, not only for our community, but most importantly for our kids, right? And at minimum, for me, I'm not going to be satisfied until at least they take care of youth for the next 18 years in the community. Everything else we can negotiate, but that I'm not really budging on. So we have these 4 pillars: beautification and social justice, economic development, education and workforce development, and public health and wellness. And we have a lot of different projects that we're working on across the board. But one of the biggest things is, how do we turn Lincoln Heights, which is an absolutely historic community. The Isley brothers are from there, Nikki Giovanni. If you're in gospel, Dr. Charles Fold, your gospel music workshop, baby, you know about him. But then, also, the first self-sustaining Black community in the country. It was the first all Black, K through 12 school district post Reconstruction. Just amazing first that this community has. So us being in the 75th year, we're actually working on a documentary. We have the kids shooting it. So it's kids and college students. They're the ones leading the charge, so they get production credits. So that's pretty dope. And we dedicated a mural, 80-foot mural, celebrating the history. That was last Labor Day. And really, we're just trying to get a bunch of stuff going. And STEAM is just so important, really. So for us, from an educational perspective, and as we engage our corporate partners, so GE Aviation is right across the street, right across the highway, as well as Procter & Gamble. Most people don't know this, but Cincinnati has the most Fortune 100 companies of anywhere else in the country other than Silicon Valley now. And so our thing is hey, y'all haven't been developing y'all minority talent right here at home. And that's what we're trying to do when we talk about STEAM and making Lincoln Heights a community of innovation. And how are we really grooming kids at an early age to get interested in STEM, look into the careers of the future, and really us build this pipeline, and we just allow the arts to make it sexy.
All right. Thank you. Good job. Good job. So we're going to, last question, we're going to give to our daughter here. And someone would like to chime in. Please don't hesitate to chime in. But we just want you to drop a takeaway nugget that parents and our students can utilize now and in 2022.
Okay, a year from now.
Yeah, a year from now.
One is stay connected to your child's education. I think more parents had to get all hands on deck during this pandemic. And so we know that was very taxing, very tiring, a lot of relearning, because you may have to help with work that you didn't really know how to do. But going back into school, as we talked about last week during the podcast, you're definitely welcome to go rewatch. We talked about how school just cannot open the same. We cannot open in August like we opened every other August or July whenever teachers come back. And that requires a different level of intentionality, a different level of parents being hands-on. And I think even students, parents being hands-on at home as well, because like Principal Gear said, when the students come back first day of school, they're going to be exhausted. So just being mindful of your child as having a pivot in life, and they're going to go back into a classroom with other children, whether it's social distance or mask on, it's going to be totally different. So parents have to stay hands-on as much as possible, even with a high schooler, because there was actually a story recently about a high schooler in Baltimore that parent had no idea that the child had failed most of his classes. Very interesting story. But even high school and middle school, parents are oftentimes, getting hands off because they're older, but we have to have our hands on our babies at all times, even as they go back into the school building.
Well, thank you so much. I'm definitely educated more now. I got some information from the experts. So on behalf of my wife, we just want to thank you all for joining us. You have been excellent guests. We couldn't have asked for any more than what you've already given us. So we're just excited that you were with us. Thank you so much. And we normally, because God's first, we like to close out on some scriptures. And Brother Eric know how Pastor Ben is. We're going to close out on some scriptures to give some encouraging words for everyone, not only including our panelists, but those who are also listening. And we just pray that you as administrators and teachers are summed up in these scriptures. Proverbs 23:12 says, apply thy heart unto instruction and thy ears to the words of knowledge. Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Numbers 6:24-26 says, may the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord smile on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord show you his favor and give you his peace. God is worthy of our praise, not just during this COVID-19 pandemic, but every day. And we can just look at how he has blessed and protected and provided and projected our panelists with careers and how they're continuing to grow. We just thank God for you. And Psalms 126:3 says, the Lord has done great things for us, whereof we are glad. And this last scripture today, our recommendation can be found in Proverbs 3:6. Seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take. We want to thank you. We pray that you will continue to do a great job. Have a blessed week. All those that have joined us, remember the question that we asked. You see the email address scrolling at the bottom. So we want you to email the last question that was asked. Thank you so much. You guys have a blessed week, and we really appreciate you joining us on today. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Appreciate you having us.
That was awesome.
Love you. Bye-bye.